Well, it is wonderful to be together with you again. Um, Today, we're celebrating Father's Day, right? I missed the wrong day. Man, I got the wrong sermon. Um, Now, today is a wonderful day. We can celebrate Mother's Day. And just to give you a little bit of an understanding in regards to preachers, there's always a discussion. In the seminaries, in Bible schools, in regards to preaching God's Word. And since I teach pastors how to preach, I'm very involved in this discussion. At least it comes to me. And the discussion goes like this. When should we preach just verse by verse through a book of the Bible, continue to do that, and whenever there's a holiday, except for Christmas and Resurrection Sunday, those are the only two valid holidays. So no matter what the holiday may be, we should only preach from a book of the Bible, continue that. So even if it's Mother's Day, Father's Day, some pastors feel like we shouldn't stop what we're doing and take that day. Even though they celebrate Mother's Day with their families, but in terms of the message, no message on Mother's Day, no message on fathers to fathers on Father's Day. So the question usually comes is, should we do that? And there's different opinions. Some say yes, don't honor any of the holidays in your sermons, except for Resurrection Sunday, Easter Sunday, and Christmas. And if you ask why, they'll say, well, if you don't preach on Resurrection Sunday, a special sermon that day and a special sermon on Christmas, your church will probably kick you out. So maybe that's usually the reason for it. But anyway, that's one approach. The other approach is, well, we should honor every holiday. And especially Mother's Day, Father's Day. And sometimes in America we have like Veterans Day. We have other holidays sometimes that are celebrated as well. And usually when you get to that viewpoint, then the discussion goes, how many holidays are we going to preach? Or are we going to celebrate in our sermons? Because it seems like we're going to have a holiday every week. And so people get tired of all the holidays. But I'm like, I think it's a wonderful thing to celebrate Mother's Day and Father's Day. I'm glad it's on the calendar. And usually the viewpoint is that the pastor will compromise. He'll say, well, I will preach a Mother's Day sermon. Because if I don't preach a Mother's Day sermon, all the mothers will be unhappy. But fathers, you're out. On Father's Day, we're not even going to acknowledge it, at least in the sermon. You can get over it. You don't have it. You don't need it. But I think it's actually a wonderful thing to be able to celebrate these days and think about these days and even be able to force ourselves to think about them from a biblical perspective. So what we do every year at Lifefield, just so you know, is we take the Resurrection Sunday holiday and we put it on the calendar, Mother's Day and then Father's Day, 3 months in a row, April usually, unless Resurrection Sunday's in March, usually April, May, June. And Pastor Norman preaches one of those. Pastor Ray preaches another one. He'll be preaching on Father's Day. And then I preach one of the three. So we rotate. But it gives us an opportunity to think about these special days. And so as I was preparing and thinking through what to do, I'm reminded of a story that you probably have heard before, but it's the story of Hannah. And so we're going to be looking at 1 Samuel chapter 1 and focusing primarily on 1 Samuel chapter 2. But it's a story, an interesting story, of this mother named Hannah, and what happens to her and what she says becomes very, very very interesting, and it becomes a very timely message, I think, for mothers. And because she experienced being a mother. And part of the drama that happened in her life was in the relationship to her being a mother. There's a passage in 1 Peter chapter 5. When we went through 1 Peter, we looked at it. And and there's a verse in there in 1 Peter chapter 5 where Peter mentions, he says, cast all of your worries or your anxieties on Christ. Place all of those worries on Him because He cares for you. And the point that Peter is trying to say there, what he's wanting to communicate, is that he's telling the Christians who are facing persecution, facing difficult trials, going through hardships and difficulties, by the statement, cast all your anxieties and worries on Christ because He cares for you, that is a message in one verse that says you need to fully trust in the Lord for everything, no matter what. Now, we've heard that many times. That's nothing new. And you would all agree that that's biblical truth. But it's one thing to make the statement, which is a good thing to make the statement. It's a good thing to make that assertion, to encourage everyone to trust in Christ, to trust in the Lord, not just for salvation, but a daily perspective. For everything, day by day. Because life happens. You never know what's going to occur, what may happen today or tomorrow. You don't have everything planned out. Today, traffic may be good. Tomorrow, not so much. Well, tomorrow it's a holiday, election day, right? Yeah. So it could be good. It could still be bad because it's the Philippines. You never know. But no matter what happens in life, we have to trust in the Lord. It's one thing to say that, but it's another thing to be able to provide you an illustration of that. To be able to see that lived out. To see somebody do that. Go through that. Walk through that. And see the principle of trusting in the Lord for everything. To see it played out in someone's life. Well, that's what you have with Hannah. With Hannah. She is a person that demonstrates trust in the Lord. And you may be wondering, why does the book of 1 Samuel open up with Hannah when this should be about Samuel? This should be all about Samuel and what comes after that and you know the kingship of the nation of Israel. Why does it open up with this woman? It's because she will be the mother of Samuel. And if you look at this, the events of chapter 1 are preparation for what she says in chapter 2, which we're going to focus upon, her statements in chapter 2. And chapter 2, the statements that she makes in chapter 2 that we'll look at, really provide the framework for the entire book of 1 Samuel. So the author has included these two chapters, included this material, this story and these statements by Hannah to really provide the whole setup for the entire book of 1 Samuel. But the story and the comments that she makes in regards to what happens to her are an example, an illustration of going through the process of having to trust in the Lord for everything. And hopefully you mothers will be able to kind of relate to it. Because this is about a mother. There's other people in the story, but it focuses on Hannah. So if you have a Bible, turn to 1 Samuel chapter 1. We'll start there and then work our way to chapter 2. I think I got 4 hours to preach, so we'll get it rolling here. No. I'll get you out in good time so we can have pot bless. That's for sure. Okay, so you meet this guy. It says, there was a certain man from Ramathaim Zophim. That's where you need to go take your next vacation, Bakashon there. Of the hill country of Ephraim. And this man's name was Elkanah. Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, or I don't know. Son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zuph, an Ephrathite. Okay, so you got this man named Elkanah. Now the situation is, verse 2, he has 2 wives. That's never good. That is not God's ideal. That's going to create problems. I wouldn't recommend that you try that. I would stay away from that. Now, there's no commentary here to tell you that that's a problem. To say, anathema. Well, all you need to do is go back to Genesis. And you'll realize that you should only have one wife at a time. And the only way this works is if your wife passes away, your spouse passes away, right? That happened to my mother. My mother passed away when I was young. She died when she was 42, died of cancer. And my dad met a lady about a year and a half later. She had never had any family of her own, never been married before. She had been a missionary to Niger for a few years back in the 50s. And but 2 years later, they got married and been married ever since. And my father has actually been married to my stepmother longer than he was married to my mom. It's kind of interesting. But they love each other and they're still together. And Lord may take them home to heaven at some point in the future. But for now, they are still together and still alive and serving the Lord together. So, Elkanah has 2 wives. Okay, the name of the one was Hannah, and the name of the other is Peninnah. Don't worry, there's no quiz next week. Now, it's one thing to have 2 wives, but here's the drama. Here's where the drama begins. Peninnah, it says at the end of verse 2, she has children. Hannah, no children. Voila. Malangana. You say, well, what's the point? Why is that so bad? It's because in that culture, in that day, not to have children brought a stigma of shame upon you. It wasn't like sometimes today, if you don't have children, there's no cultural stigma. You may want children and you can adopt, but back in those days, if you could not produce children for a woman, that brought great shame. It brought self-guilt. It brought shame. It could bring depression. It could bring emotional drama is what it would bring. So by just making that statement, the author is saying that one wife has children, the other one, Hannah, does not. Now, verse 3, this man used to go up year by year from his city to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts at Shiloh, where the 2 sons of Eli was a priest, and his sons Hophni and Phinehas were priests of the Lord. So on the day when Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to Peninnah his wife and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah, he gave a double portion because he loved her. Now, it says here, though the Lord had closed her womb. So Hannah is not having children, Walanganak, because of what the Lord is doing. The Lord has shut her womb so that no child can be produced. This is the Lord's doing. Now, does she know that? No. And the people around her don't know that. Now, the husband gives her a double portion, maybe as a way, because it says he loved her, he cared about her, and maybe as a way to try to compensate for her not having children. Remember, there's this stigma. But the Lord had closed her womb. But you have to begin to think about, if you want to think about it in terms of the worry meter, how high does this go? So the stigma of cultural shame brought about a certain level of anxiety in Hannah's life. Just that by itself. Even though her husband is trying to maybe compensate for this and give her a double portion to be a benefit to her, not to have children, not be able to bear children, brought a certain level of anxiety, a certain level of worry in her life. So she's having to deal with this. Well, to make it worse, her rival, that's the other wife. Bad. That's one way to refer to the other wife, the rival. Man. You see why two wives are not good with the same husband? It never works. Her rival used to provoke her grievously, and she did it to irritate her. I mean, this was premeditated. Because the Lord had closed her womb. So, she can't bear children, number one. Anxiety meter here. And now the rival, the other wife, who does have children, would provoke her. Make it worse. How would she do that? She'd say, hey, I have children. Voila. Voila, parasite. Yo. You know. No children for you. God's not blessing you. You know. That's the real laugh track we talk about, you know. And so just imagine having to deal with that. You know, here's a woman, Hannah, who's dependent on her husband for her living, for her livelihood. She has nowhere to go. And she so desperately would want a child. But the Lord had closed her womb for a reason. But people did not know that. And the rival, the other wife, made it worse. So imagine the worry meter, the anxiety meter increasing. Now, not only did this happen once, it went on year by year. As often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. It was every year. You could imagine, Elkanah would say, okay, it's time to go down to Shiloh. Oh, my. You know, it's not something she looks forward to. This is not something she's happy about. This is something she doesn't want to participate in. She's had enough. So here's a woman going through a crisis in her life, turmoil in her life, and it's creating great anxiety. How do we know that? Look at what comes next. Therefore Hannah, she wept and would not eat. There is anxiety. You ever worried about something to the point where you cannot eat? It affects you physically? It will. It's not just, it's not just all in your head. You can't just get over it. It's not like a switch you can turn off. She's dealing with all of this, and it affected her physically. It got to that point where it affected her physically, and so she couldn't eat. And then Elkanah, he makes it worse. He says to her, Hannah, why are you weeping? Boy, and I know he loves her, but he's, I get that. He can be insensitive. He's about ready to say the insensitive thing, not the loving thing. Why do you weep, woman? Why don't you eat? What's wrong with you? Why is your heart sad? Bucket. And then this is the insensitive comment. Am I not more to you than 10 sons? You don't need children when you have me. You don't say that to women, you know. That's insensitive. Man, you can get some marriage counseling out of this passage. You ever said that, husbands? Yeah. We pick on you next month. But, you know, you say the wrong thing. I've been there, right? Yeah, I've been there. Just talk to her. She'll tell you. She keeps a catalog, a record. You know those record books you can buy at National? She's filled up about 5 of them in 5 years. And so it's what we call the diary you don't want to read. But he says that. So imagine what's going on. The anxiety meter's increasing. It's like the other woman's my rival. She's making it worse. My husband, he doesn't understand. And it's so much drama and so much anxiety in her life that it's creating a physical situation where she can't even eat. And it says in verse 9, after they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh, not that she drank and ate, but after the family did, Hannah rose. She got up. Eli the priest was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed. There's the anxiety. But what did she do? Did she go and say, well, you know what, I need to take a chill pill, or I just need to go booze it up and forget about my troubles in life? How did she deal with it? Here's what you see her doing. This is where the worry goes to trust. Yes, she's dealing with emotional turmoil. Yes, she's dealing with this anxiety, and it's growing and growing. But it didn't lead her to depression. It led her to the Lord. She was deeply distressed, but she prayed to the Lord and she wept bitterly. And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. She continued praying before the Lord. Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was speaking in her heart. Only her lips were moving. Her voice could not be heard. So Eli took her to be a drunken woman. It's like, you know, she's got so much distress, she's not even drinking. So it's not that she's drunk. He misobserves, wrongly observes. Eli said to her, how long will you go on being drunk? Put your wine away from you. She's probably thinking, Lord, what are these insensitive men around me saying? Getting it from my husband, getting it from my pastor. You know, that's all it takes. It's bad when your husband is the pastor too, right? Yeah. That's the problem. Double whammy. Yeah, there we go. But Hannah answered, no, my Lord. I am a woman troubled in spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I've been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for all along I've been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation. The anxiety speaks to the emotional turmoil of her life. The vexation is the actual practical circumstances that she's dealing with because of all that. But here's what she does. She goes to the Lord with it. She is an example of casting your care upon the Lord because He cares for you. And she rises above the circumstances because she goes to the Lord, prays to Him in the midst of her situation. Eli answers, verse 17, go in peace. The God of Israel grant your petition that you have made to Him. And she said, let your servant find favor in your eyes. Then notice verse 18. Then the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. She had gotten to the place by releasing it to the Lord. Her situation had not changed. She still has the rival. Husband's still insensitive. And she's still not bearing a child. Not at that time. But now she could eat, and now she had her sad face had gone away. Why was that? It was because in the midst of her great trial and turmoil, she went to the Lord. She went to the Lord and cast all of the anxieties and really truly gave it to Him, for Him to bear the burden. That's what a mother has to do. It's what a father has to do, but especially a mother. There will be times in your life when you will go through great turmoil and stress. Trust me, there will be. You probably could catalog it. You may be going through something right now. And I'm talking about great stress, that which would bring stress and turmoil and anxiety, because there's no way for you to control it. You can't control the situation that you're facing. You can't control the situation that you're dealing with. It's too big than you can handle. But you're in the midst of it. We've all been there. And the problem is sometimes we want to solve it all our way. We want to take control. And that doesn't work. What Hannah is a living example of is trusting in the Lord when your circumstances haven't changed. When they're still when the physical circumstances are the same. But you know what happens? You read the rest of chapter 1. Hannah gets pregnant. Hannah has a child. And that child's a boy. And Hannah nurses him, weans him. And then she gives him back to God. Fulfills her vow. And so Samuel grows up with living in the priestly area. He grows up around Eli. And God's got a special mission planned for Samuel. A special task. A special thing to do. After she weans Samuel and leaves him with the priest, she goes back to her home with her husband, and she has other children. God changes her physical situation. But in the midst of that situation being changed, what you have in chapter 2, and this is where I want to focus for the time we got remaining. What you have in chapter 2 is her reflection upon everything. She's reflecting back to everything that happened in chapter 1. All that she dealt with, all that she went through. And she's giving her statements here, her expressions from her heart. She's directing them to God and talking about God. What's interesting is she's speaking in a form of Hebrew poetry, which is very interesting. If you have one of the, like ESV version Bible, it's actually indented. So here's where narrative meets poetry. When you're thinking of it in terms of, see, that's why we had those classes, right? Yeah, see, I know what I'm doing. That's for the preaching guys. But what you have here is her expressions of what the Lord has brought her through and what she has learned from going through that situation. This is a reflection on what she's learned about her Lord in the midst of having to trust Him. And this is where the beauty of trusting in the Lord is displayed. Okay? So chapter 1, she's trusting the Lord. You see that. Now she's reflecting on it, and you see the beautiful nature of it because of what she learns from it. Let me just read the passage to you. Hannah prayed and said, my heart exalts in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth derides my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation. There is none holy like the Lord, for there is none beside you. There is no rock like our God. Talk no more so very proudly. Let not arrogance come from your mouth, for the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty are broken, but the feeble bind on strength. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread, but those who were hungry have ceased to hunger. The barren has borne 7, but she who has many children is forlorn. The Lord kills and brings to life. He brings down to Sheol and raises up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and he exalts. He raises up the poor from the dust. He lifts the needy from the ash heap, to make them sit with princesses, and inherit a seat of honor. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and on them he has set the world. He will guard the feet of his faithful ones, but the wicked shall be cut off in darkness. For not by might shall a man prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Against them he will thunder in heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king, and exalt the horn of his anointed. This is the beauty of trusting the Lord in the statements that she makes. Now, it's a very interesting set of poetry here, of Hebrew poetry. And poetry, by very nature, what poetry does, it's a way, we learned this when we went through the Psalms. Poetry helps understand the emotions of what people are feeling. What we have here is what Hannah has learned from what she has gone through. And it's what she's learned about her Lord, and how she expresses that is the beauty of it. And the way I look at this is there's 3 things that she has seen here. She learns to trust in the Lord for everything. She's learned that. And she understands that the Lord is faithful, is faithful to her, has been faithful to her in 3 major ways. 3 major ways. The first way is that the Lord has been faithful to her by being her deliverer. Deliverer. Take a look at this. Hannah makes these statements. My heart exalts in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth derides my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation. And the idea of salvation is not like spiritual salvation. It's the idea of being delivered from her situation. God had closed her womb, and then he opened her womb and brought her through that. And that has brought great joy in her life. She exalts in the Lord. She says, there's none holy like the Lord. There's none beside you. There is no rock like our God. And the idea of rock is it's an imagery. It's not saying God is a stone. Okay? It's saying God is like a rock. And what the rock represents that which cannot be moved. That which is big and strong. There's no one more powerful than God who can bring me through this, and who did bring me through this. So I'm going to exalt in the Lord. I'm going to rejoice in your deliverance. There's nobody else like you, Lord. You are the only one that can bring me through this. And by seeing this, by the statements that she's making, she's saying, God, you have been my deliverer. Even when you're going through the hardship and the difficult situation, the trouble, the trial, the stress, the anxiety of it all, you have to know that God is still your deliverer. And you may say, well, he hasn't delivered me from this problem. Well, he may not. But he's still your deliverer. Now, for Hannah, he did bring about deliverance from that situation. But the point is, she had learned the principle, the truth, that the Lord is the deliverer. You're not promised, and I am not promised in this life that everything's going to go well. Most of the time, it doesn't. I mean, if you could do a percentage, it's not 50-50 either. 50 times good, 50 times bad. Usually it's, 80-20, and even the 20% that's good is still a job trying to get it done. It doesn't. Sometimes you ever had a day where nothing goes the way you planned it? You been there? That's the days you may just want to think about it this way. When you have days like that, you got to say, Lord, I got to trust you no matter what. Because I saw this day going somewhere else than what it actually has happened. And what Hannah had learned was to rejoice in God because He was her deliverer. She says here in verse 1, my horn is exalted in the Lord. She's not saying that she has a horn sticking out of her head, okay? Again, don't think that. The idea of the horn, a horn on an animal represented strength. And it represented that. And so when she's talking about my horn, it's a figure of speech. It's using imagery. She's saying my heart rejoices, my emotions, right? My center of my being. Internally, the horn represents outward ability. It's that which has the strength to it. And so it's just her way of saying, no matter everything on the inside and outside, everything I'm practicing, it's like saying my hands. That which I use to physically do something is exalted in the Lord. By what I say and what I feel and what I know to be true and by my actions that show it. And that's why she'll talk about what she speaks, my mouth. And you know what? My enemies are there to keep me down. I will not listen to that. I will not focus on that. I will not focus on that negativity. I will stay positive that the Lord is my deliverer. That He delivers me. That He's there. He doesn't walk away. He doesn't go away. He's there with me. He's faithful. People may fail you. God will never fail you. God is a deliverer. No matter what you're going through as a mother, you may be worried about your children. Are they going to, grow up and be okay and love the Lord? Are they going to fall off on the deep end? It's okay to pray and think about those things. But you got to remember that God is still in charge. He delivered you from sin. He can deliver you from any situation that He deems necessary. The point is, do you view God as your deliverer? And that means that there's no one else that can do that. Government cannot solve your problem. I don't care who the president is. World leaders cannot solve your problem. They can't fix it. Never will. Other people may not be able to solve your problem. God could use other people, but most of the time people who try to do it on their own, no. God is the one that's really the problem solver. He is the deliverer. And we have to remember that. Hannah had learned that. God had solved the situation in a way that she didn't fully grasp the significance of until probably later. And she's just knowing that God is her deliverer. Secondly, the Lord is her supporter. Her supporter. This is interesting. Talk no more so very proudly. It's like she's addressing those who would be the ones who would oppose her. Let not arrogance come from your mouth, for the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by Him actions are weighed. So it's as though she's turning to talk to the wicked, to those who would oppose her. I think this is kind of like a message to the rival. Don't talk that Don't talk proudly anymore. Don't let arrogance come from your mouth. The Lord is the God of knowledge. By Him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty are broken. See, you know, I think she's got the other wife in her mind. She's, just imagine. She's like, look, you want to trust in that? You want to ridicule me and all that stuff? Go right ahead. But you better learn, God weighs everything in the balance. And He can take your mighty strength that you think you have, and He can bring you down. He can bring down the mighty, but the feeble bind on strength. Verse 5, those who were full have hired themselves out for bread. The ones who had everything, now you're poor. God knows how to change. Guess what I've learned? God can change situations. He can change bad situations to good and good situations to bad. But those who were hungry have ceased to hunger. The barren, who you think the barren was? We're not talking about Baron, but barren. She's referring to herself. Guess what? I've borne 7 children. There was a day that I had none. Voila. Now 7. But she who has many children is forlorn. Meaning the other wife. You've passed your prime. The Lord kills and brings to life. He brings down to Sheol and He raises up. The Lord makes poor and He makes rich. He brings low and He exalts. He raises up the poor from the dust. He lifts the needy from the ash heap to make them sit with princes and inherit a seat of honor. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and on them He has set the world. Now, she's giving a lot of statements, but the gist of it is, the summary of it is, not only is the Lord her deliverer, the Lord is her supporter. She's going back, it's just like, she's like dressing the other wife and saying, listen, you can attack me every day. But one thing I've learned, God knows how to change situations. God knows how to mete out justice. And God has chosen to support me. He heard my prayer. He answered my prayer. And this is not Hannah being vengeful. That's the last thing that she would do. But she is stating a truth. You don't mess with God. You don't live in this world with a bunch of arrogance thinking that you know more than God does. Hannah had learned that truth. You live in this world realizing that you're not the captain of the ship. You're not the one that controls it all. You are the one that depends on God to support you. You are dependent upon Him. That's what she means when she says, the Lord is my supporter. He's really in charge. Man, he controls everything. He has so much power. And it's just, she's at the end of this, verse 8, the pillars of the earth are the Lord's. He sets the world on it. I mean, not only does He have power to do things, to change situations, He has the power, and He has demonstrated His power to even create this world and put it into motion. And what she had learned, the beauty of what she had learned, was that trusting in the Lord meant that she could trust in the Lord to be her supporter, to be her provider, to be her sustainer. She realized that. The other wife didn't know that truth. Didn't live daily with the knowledge of that truth. When you realize that God is really on the throne and that God is really in charge, it should give you a perspective. That helps take the anxiety away, because it should give you a perspective so that you know that God, nothing is going to take God by surprise. Things may take you by surprise, but not Him. And sometimes we forget that. We're in the midst of our day-to-day world, and then we're surprised by something. We didn't see that coming. We didn't see this situation coming. We didn't see that situation coming. And we have to adjust. And we don't like adjusting. We don't like changing. You know, why does it have to be this way? I wanted it this way, not that way. And it creates turmoil. But for God, He already knew. He's powerful. And we need to be more focused on not living in arrogance, but living in trust and living in the understanding that God is really one on the throne. For you mothers, He'll take care of your family. Does that relinquish you from responsibility? No. He will use you to help take care of your family. But He knows what's going to happen. And you can't live in fear. You can't live in anxiety. Hannah had learned that. If God's my deliverer and God's my supporter, I got to trust in Him, not my anxiety. If God really has all the power to do what she has stated, then God can and He will lead and guide you through the situations that you face. You're not alone. You have a supporter. Now, for Hannah, her husband tried to be, but he wasn't a good one. He wasn't, he loved her, but very insensitive. And you as a mother, you're told to have a relationship with your husband, and he's the father of your children, and you want to depend on him, but even fathers fail. We're not perfect. Don't look to us to solve every problem. We can't. We may want to, but honestly, we can't. Only God is the one that's truly in charge. And you have to learn that truth. You have to learn to live with that truth and incorporate that truth in the midst of the situations that you face as a mother. The final truth that she had learned, and she expresses in verses 9 and 10. He says, He will guard the feet of His faithful ones. Not only is the Lord her deliverer and supporter, He's her guardian, protector. He will guard the feet of His faithful ones, but the wicked, shall be cut off in darkness. Don't mess with God. For not by might shall a man prevail. It's not about how powerful you are and how much strength you may have and how loud your voice can go. In reality, God's in charge and He will protect His faithful ones. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Just take that for what it says. Against them He will thunder in heaven. Man. He's more mightier than Thor. Just so you know that. With the Lord, here's the reference. He's the real end game. 2 weeks in a row. He's able to work it in. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to His king, and He will exalt the horn of His anointed one. That phrase, He will give strength to His king, you know what that's a preview of in the book of Samuel? David over Saul. And David's the anointed one. in the lineage of the Messiah. But what Hannah is saying is, God's not only my deliverer, my supporter, He's my guardian. He's my protector. We worry sometimes because we feel like, is there anybody there who will actually protect us? Protect us from the evil. The Lord is really the protector. He's the guardian. He's the biggest agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. there ever was. This is, and He will avenge if He needs to. See, it all comes in here. It all works. But you see, the point is, Hannah had learned that God will protect, that God will oversee. He will protect her, support her, and deliver her through the situations that require it. She had learned to trust in God, and by knowing it, it's one thing to trust in God. It's another thing to truly understand it and live in it daily and incorporate those truths of that into one's life. And that's what Hannah is expressing here. That's what makes trusting in the Lord beautiful. Because it becomes a part of who you are. It'll define who you are as a woman for God, as a mother. You'll be known by this. You'll be known as a woman, as a mother who trusts in God, trusts in the Lord, lives for Him. You may not have you may not understand everything, and you may still battle with things. Life can be difficult, but it's how you handle it. It's how you deal with it. I don't know what you're facing, what you're going through. I don't know everything. But whatever it may be, God will see you through it. God will see you through it. He'll walk you through the journey. He's not going to leave you or forsake you. Doesn't mean it won't be easy. It may be difficult. Mahira. But the Lord will be your protector. He'll lead you, guide you, support you. And pray for Him to deliver you. Pray for Him to solve the problem. He can do that. I think if you learn those, especially you mothers, you learn to live by this truth, not only will you have a happy Mother's Day one day a year, you can have it 365. But fathers, this is a good truth too for us. But we'll pick on you next month. So, but an understanding of trusting in the Lord, of seeing it lived out, seeing how learning to trust in God can become, and should become a part of who we are. It should define us as a believer. It should affect how we think and how we process what we go through, the different situations that we go through, the good situations and the bad situations, the pleasant ones and the difficult ones. Let's pray. Dear Lord, as we come to the end of our time of hearing from your word, Lord, we are thankful for all of our mothers and for Hannah and what you had taught her, what you had led her to see. What a blessing this is to see that she had not only learned these truths, but she had incorporated into her understanding, her thinking, became a part of her, of what defines her. She lived in accordance to these principles, these truths. Lord, I pray that we would see those as well. The beauty, it is beautiful that she trusted in you and how she expressed that. Lord, may you be praised in all we say and all that we do. We give you thanks in Jesus' name.